Before we begin, let us know where you're listening from. After the story, rate it from 1 to 10. Now let's start. The Montana wind carried the scent of pine and promises as it swept across the rolling plains. Harper O'Malley wiped the sweat from his brow, squinting at the horizon where the sun was beginning its slow descent. 35 years on this earth, and the last 5 alone on his family's struggling cattle ranch had carved lines into his face that made him look older than his years. The Blue Creek Ranch had been in the O'Malley family for 3 generations, but after his father's passing and his mother's move to Arizona for her health, Harper found himself the sole caretaker of a legacy that was slowly slipping through his calloused fingers. The drought of the past 2 summers had been brutal, and the harsh winter that followed had claimed more cattle than he could afford to lose. He dismounted his horse, a sturdy quarter horse named Rusty, and led him to the water trough. "Just you and me again tonight, old boy," he murmured, running a hand down the horse's muscled neck. 200 miles away, in the bustling city of Denver, Fiona James stared at the eviction notice taped to her apartment door. At 28, she had believed she was finally getting her life on track after years of struggle. The bakery where she worked had closed without warning, leaving her jobless and with rent due in 3 days. She sank onto her worn sofa, surrounded by the remnants of her culinary school dreams. Expensive cookbooks, a set of professional knives she'd saved for months to buy, and a stand mixer that had been her grandmother's. The same grandmother who had taught her to bake, to find solace in the precision of measurements and the alchemy of ingredients. Fiona's phone rang, the screen lighting up with her sister's name. "Hey, Emma," she answered, trying to keep the defeat from her voice. "Fi, how are you holding up?" "I've been better. The eviction notice came today." Emma's sigh carried through the line. "I wish I could help, but with the twins and Mark's medical bills." "I know, Em. I'd never ask." Fiona twisted a strand of her auburn hair around her finger, a nervous habit from childhood. "I've been looking at job listings all day. There's nothing here, not in my field anyway." "What about that newspaper clipping I sent you? The one about the rancher looking for help?" Fiona glanced at her email, where Emma's message sat unopened. "A ranch? I'm a pastry chef, not a cowgirl. He's looking for someone to cook and help around the house. It includes room and board. At least it would give you some time to figure things out." Later that night, Fiona stared at the listing. Harper O'Malley of Blue Creek Ranch was seeking a responsible individual for cooking and household management. Housing provided. Experience with ranch life preferred but not required. It was the last line that caught her attention. Must be comfortable with solitude. Something about those words resonated with her. Solitude wasn't something she feared. In fact, after the chaos of the past few weeks, it sounded like a balm. Before she could talk herself out of it, she drafted an email, attaching her resume with its impressive but now seemingly useless culinary credentials. She hit send and tried not to think about how desperate her situation had become. 3 days later, after a brief phone conversation that consisted mostly of Harper asking practical questions in a deep, measured voice that revealed little of the man behind it, Fiona packed her life into her aging Honda Civic and headed west. The landscape changed gradually, the urban sprawl giving way to foothills, then mountains, then vast expanses of grassland dotted with cattle. The directions Harper had provided led her down increasingly narrow roads until she turned onto a dirt path marked only by a weathered wooden sign, Blue Creek Ranch. The ranch house came into view as she crested a small hill, a 2-story structure of wood and stone that seemed to have grown naturally from the Montana soil. It wasn't grand, but it had a sturdy permanence that appealed to something deep within her. A man emerged from a barn to the side of the house as she pulled up. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his skin tanned from years under the sun. Dark hair, flecked with premature gray at the temples, was partially hidden beneath a well-worn cowboy hat. He approached her car with an unhurried gait, his expression unreadable. Fiona stepped out, suddenly aware of how out of place she must look in her city clothes, with her car packed to the brim with the trappings of her former life. "Mr. O'Malley?" she asked, extending her hand. He took it, his grip firm but not overpowering. "Harper," he corrected. "You made good time, Miss James." "Fiona, please." She glanced around, taking in the vastness of the property. "It's beautiful here." Harper followed her gaze, a flicker of something, pride, perhaps, crossing his features. "It's home," he said simply. "Let me show you where you'll be staying." The guest room was on the first floor of the house, a clean, Spartan space with a bed, dresser, and a small desk beneath a window that looked out over miles of prairie grass. The bathroom was down the hall, and Harper explained that they would share the kitchen and living areas. "I'm up before dawn," he told her, leaning against the doorframe. "Breakfast at 5:30, lunch around noon if I'm near the house, dinner at 7. I'm not particular about what you cook, as long as it's filling." Fiona nodded, taking mental notes. "And the other household duties?" "Laundry, cleaning, general upkeep of the house. I've been managing on my own, but with calving season coming, I won't have time for both." Calving season? The term was foreign to her. A brief smile touched his lips. "You really are from the city. The cows will be having their calves soon." "It's the busiest time of the year for a cattle ranch." She felt a flush of embarrassment. "I have a lot to learn." "You'll catch on," he said, pushing away from the doorframe. "Get settled in. Kitchen stocked, but if you need anything specific, write it down. I make a supply run to town every 2 weeks." With that, he was gone, boots echoing down the hallway, leaving Fiona alone with the sudden, overwhelming realization of what she had done. She had moved to the middle of nowhere to work for a man she barely knew, whose lifestyle was completely foreign to her. But as she unpacked her clothes and arranged her precious cookbooks on the desk, she felt a strange sense of rightness, as if some part of her had been waiting for this moment, this place. The first few weeks established a rhythm. Harper was a man of few words but clear expectations. He worked from sunup to sundown, stopping only for the meals Fiona prepared. At first, she stuck to simple, hearty fare: stews, roasts, casseroles. But gradually, she began to introduce more complex dishes, drawing on her culinary training. Harper never commented on the food directly, but she noticed he began to linger a bit longer at the table, sometimes asking about her technique or ingredients. These small conversations were like breadcrumbs, leading her gradually toward understanding the reserved man who employed her. She learned he had been engaged once, to a woman named Valerie who had ultimately chosen city life over love. That his father had died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving Harper to take over the ranch sooner than expected. That he played guitar, though she had yet to hear him. In turn, she shared pieces of herself, her childhood in Oregon, her parents' divorce, her grandmother's influence on her love of baking. She told him about culinary school, about the bakery's closure, about her dreams of someday having her own restaurant. One evening, as March gave way to April and the first calves began to arrive, Harper came in later than usual, exhaustion evident in the slump of his shoulders. "Rough day?" Fiona asked, sliding a plate of pot roast and vegetables in front of him. He nodded, picking up his fork. "Lost a calf. Mother too. I'm sorry." She poured him a cup of coffee, black and strong, the way he preferred it. Part of ranching. He took a bite, then looked up at her. "This is good. Different. I added some herbs from the windowsill garden I started." "It's good," he repeated, and though the words were simple, she felt a warm glow of satisfaction. After dinner, instead of retreating to his study as he usually did, Harper remained at the table, nursing his coffee. "Why did you answer my ad?" he asked suddenly. "You're overqualified to be cooking for a rancher." Fiona considered deflecting but decided on honesty. "I was desperate. Evicted, unemployed, with nowhere to go." He nodded, as if her answer confirmed something he'd suspected. "And now? It's been a month. Still desperate?" The question caught her off guard. She looked around the kitchen, at the space she had gradually made her own, with herbs growing in pots and her grandmother's mixer now permanently stationed on the counter. "No," she said slowly. "Not desperate anymore." Harper's eyes, a deep brown that reminded her of fertile soil, held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Good," he said finally, rising from the table. "Calving's in full swing now. I could use an extra hand tomorrow, if you're willing to learn." The offer surprised her. "You want me to help with the cattle?" "Just the basics. Watching for signs of distress, knowing when to call me." He paused at the doorway. "Unless you'd rather stick to the house." "No, I'd like to learn," she said quickly, perhaps too quickly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Be ready at first light. We're layers. Nights are still cold." The next morning, Fiona arose before dawn, dressing in jeans, a flannel shirt, and the work boots she'd purchased during their last trip to town. Her hands trembled slightly as she braided her hair, not from the early hour, but from a nervous anticipation she couldn't quite name. Harper was already in the kitchen, pouring coffee into 2 travel mugs. He handed one to her without comment, but his eyes took in her outfit, lingering briefly on the braid draped over her shoulder. "You'll do," he said, and coming from Harper, it felt like high praise. They took his truck to the south pasture, where a group of pregnant heifers had been separated from the main herd. The sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky as Harper explained what to look for: signs of labor, potential complications, the importance of the first nursing. Throughout the day, Fiona watched in awe as Harper guided a struggling heifer through a difficult birth, his large hands gentle yet confident as they helped bring new life into the world. There was something primal and profound about witnessing it, about being part of it, even in a small way. "Here," Harper said, motioning her closer as the newborn calf, still wet and wobbling, tried to stand. "Help steady him." She knelt in the grass, supporting the calf's frail body as it found its legs for the first time. The mother cow watched warily, but Harper murmured soothing words that seemed to calm both animal and human alike. When the calf finally stood and found its way to its mother's milk, Harper's hand came to rest briefly on Fiona's shoulder. "Good job," he said, his voice low and warm. She looked up at him, at his face softened by the golden light of late afternoon, and something shifted between them, subtle as a change in the wind, but undeniable. As spring melted into summer, Fiona found herself increasingly involved in the workings of the ranch. She learned to drive the tractor, to recognize each cow by its markings, to predict weather changes by the behavior of the wildlife. The house became truly hers to manage, and she took pride in creating a space that welcomed Harper at the end of his long days. They fell into a comfortable partnership, their initial employer-employee dynamic evolving into something more collaborative, more equal. They still maintained separate spaces, separate lives in many ways, but the boundaries were softening. One evening in late July, a violent thunderstorm swept across the ranch. Harper had been out checking fences in the far pasture and hadn't returned by dinner time. As the sky darkened and lightning split the horizon, Fiona's concern grew. She was about to call his cell phone, though reception was spotty at best on the ranch, when the back door burst open and Harper stumbled in, drenched and limping. "What happened?" she gasped, rushing to help him to a chair. Horse spooked at the lightning. "I went down wrong on my ankle." He grimaced as she helped him remove his boot. "Don't think it's broken, just a bad sprain." Fiona examined his ankle, which was already swelling. "You need ice, elevation, and rest." Her tone brooked no argument. To her surprise, Harper didn't protest as she helped him to the couch, propped his foot on pillows, and applied an ice pack. She brought him a plate of the stew she'd made for dinner, sitting beside him as rain lashed against the windows. "Thank you," he said after a while, his voice soft against the backdrop of the storm. "For taking care of things." "Of me." Fiona smiled, taking the empty plate from his hands. "That's what partners do, isn't it?" The word hung between them, loaded with unspoken meaning. Harper's eyes, usually so guarded, seemed to open to her, revealing depths of loneliness and longing that matched her own. "Is that what we are?" he asked. "Partners?" She hesitated, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, of the warmth radiating from his body. "I'd like to think so." His hand found hers, calloused fingers entwining with her smoother ones. "So would I." The storm raged outside, but within the walls of the ranch house, something new and fragile was taking root. Harper's injury forced him to rely on Fiona more than ever before. She took over many of his daily tasks, proving herself capable and resourceful. The neighboring ranchers, initially skeptical of the city woman in their midst, began to accept her as Harper's right hand. As his ankle healed, their relationship deepened. They spent evenings on the porch, watching the sunset while Harper finally played his guitar for her. She baked his favorite desserts, apple pie, cinnamon rolls, chocolate cake, and he taught her to ride, his hands steady at her waist as she gained confidence in the saddle. But they were still careful with each other, both carrying scars from past disappointments, both wary of risking the partnership they'd built. The catalyst came in early September, when a letter arrived from a restaurant in Bozeman. Months earlier, Before she'd fully settled into ranch life, Fiona had sent out applications to several establishments. This one, an upscale farm-to-table restaurant, was offering her a position as pastry chef. Harper found her in the garden, the letter clutched in her hand, her expression troubled. "Good news?" he asked, though something in his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "A job offer. In Bozeman." She looked up at him, searching his face for a reaction. "The kind of position I used to dream about." He nodded slowly, his expression carefully neutral. "When would you start?" 2 weeks. She folded the letter, tucking it into her pocket. "I haven't accepted yet. But you're considering it." "It wasn't a question. I came here because I was desperate, Harper. I never intended to stay forever." The words hung between them, sharp-edged and painful. Harper's jaw tightened, and he looked away, toward the distant mountains. "You should take it," he said finally. "It's what you trained for, what you wanted." "Is it?" She stepped closer to him. "I'm not sure anymore what I want." He met her gaze then, his eyes dark with emotion. "What about what I want, Fiona? Have you considered that? You've never said what you want." Her voice trembled slightly. 6 months we've been living under the same roof, working side by side, and you've never once told me what you want from me, from this." "Because I was afraid." The words burst from him, raw and honest. "Afraid you'd leave, just like everyone else. And now you are." "I haven't decided yet," she insisted. "But I need a reason to stay, Harper. A real reason." He looked at her for a long moment, the barriers he'd maintained for so long crumbling visibly. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I have since that day you helped deliver the calf, maybe even before. I love your strength, your kindness, the way you've made this place a home again. I love that you know exactly how I take my coffee, and that you hum when you bake, and that you're not afraid of hard work or solitude." Tears filled Fiona's eyes as she listened, her heart swelling with each word. "But I won't ask you to give up your dreams for me," he continued. "I won't be the reason you look back with regret someday." "What if my dreams have changed?" she asked, stepping close enough to touch him. "What if they include this ranch, these mountains you?" Harper's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle despite the calluses. "Then stay," he whispered. "Stay and build a life with me." Their first kiss was tentative, a question and answer all at once. The second was deeper, years of loneliness falling away as they found in each other something neither had dared hope for. That night, as they lay together in Harper's bed, the future stretching before them like the vast Montana sky, Fiona traced the lines of his face with her fingertips. "I can cook," she murmured, a smile playing at her lips. "I can even bear you children, if that's what we want." Harper laughed softly, pulling her closer. "What I want is you, however you come. The cooking is just a bonus." The restaurant in Bozeman received a polite declination. Instead, Fiona and Harper began making plans, for the ranch, for the house, for their life together. They would expand the garden, perhaps add some specialty crops for local restaurants. Fiona would start a small baking business, selling at farmers markets in the surrounding towns. And Harper would continue the legacy of his family's land, now with a partner to share both the burdens and the joys. Winter came again to Blue Creek Ranch, blanketing the land in pristine white. Inside the ranch house, a fire crackled in the hearth as Harper and Fiona sat at the kitchen table, going over the accounts for the year. "We're doing better than I expected," Harper said, reviewing the figures. "The new breeding program is paying off." Fiona smiled, sliding a mug of hot chocolate toward him. "And my Christmas cookie orders are already double what I projected." He took her hand across the table, his thumb brushing over the simple engagement ring he'd given her the month before. "We make a good team, don't we?" "The best," she agreed, thinking of how far they'd come, how much they'd overcome. Outside, snow fell softly on the land that had brought them together, two souls who had found in each other not just love, but a home. And as Harper pulled her into his arms, Fiona knew with absolute certainty that her desperate plea for sanctuary had led her to exactly where she was meant to be.